You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. 5 Democrats are already lining up to try to replace outgoing Secretary of State Jesse White. He's been here a long time and runs one of the state's most influential and far-reaching agencies in the Secretary of State's office. 2 members of Chicago's City Council, Pat Dowell and David Moore, are in the race. Also, the City Clerk of Chicago, Anna Valencia, former State Treasurer Alexi Janulius, and State Senator Mike Hastings, who joins us now. Good to have you with us.
Mark, it's always great to be with you.
Help us understand why this is a primary race, right? It's not just an examination of your resume. It's also a distinction as we try to learn how you're different from the other candidates in the race. Tell us how you're different.
So my experience is unlike any of the other candidates in this race. I've served in the military for 10 years. I've served in Iraq from the borders of Iran to Syria. I worked in corporate America with doctors and nurses working for a company called Johnson & Johnson, which is changing the world today. And then I've served on a school board, the 5th largest high school district in the state. And it's a great opportunity to serve. And I want to do this, Mark, because the Secretary of State's office is our interaction with state government, and it's what we derive our opinion from. And we want to make sure that it's top-tier services for folks across Illinois, not just in Chicago.
What's the single biggest thing that you'd improve at the Secretary of State's office today?
We want to modernize the office. First and foremost, if you can log into your phone and set an appointment to go work out or to go wherever for that matter, set a doctor's appointment, you should be able to do the same thing for the Secretary of State's office. Schedule an appointment so when you show up, you don't have to wait in line for an hour or 2 hours. We want to modernize business services. If anyone goes to the website, it's based on a 2000 platform. We want to upgrade government services so it's reflective of modern day technology and people will be able to interact with it.
Some reporters or just curious citizens may already be aware that lobbyists who try to influence lawmakers here in this building register through the Secretary of State's office. It's just one of a gamut of many different items that the Secretary of State's office manages, but those records can often be key to learn about government, who's taking who to dinner, who's spending what money on which candidate or which elected official. But those records are right now sort of buried in these one-off PDF documents that are sort of tucked away behind the corners of this 2000 website model that you mentioned. Would that be one of the items that would be more user-friendly, sortable, accessible?
Our office will be the most transparent office when it comes to just what goes on in government. So whether that's, if you need to get something online, whether it's business services, you should be able to walk through point 1 through 10 and figure out how to file LLC. When it comes to lobbyists, though, there should be a full database of who those lobbyists are, what money is spent on which legislator, how they interact with government, whether they're current or not. We're going to do that, and that's one of my top priorities.
I should mention the state is also right now, the state legislature is examining the ethics rules. I believe we're going to see some of those details in the days to come very, very soon here about how lobbyists interact with elected officials, how much of that is transparent, where elected officials derive their own personal wealth from, all of that. Are there any markers that you insist on seeing in that ethics package?
I'll just say that when lobbyists engage with legislators, there should be full disclosure. There's countless ideas being put together. The question is what actually forms on paper, and I'll consider all those things when it does come up. I haven't had a chance to see that yet, but I know when it does, we're going to make a decision, and people have to be held to a high standard. You represent the people of Illinois, and they expect you to work on behalf of them, not corporate interest.
What do you make of the news this week? WTTW in Chicago reporting that one of Secretary White's longtime proteges had apparently sought an appointment from Governor Pritzker to fill a vacancy at the Secretary of State's office. Secretary White is still on the job. He always says, I'm reporting for duty, and he wants to finish his term. He's said that in the past, but he's 86 years old.
Right.
It looked like there was already some bartering going on to try and replace him early. It's been sort of a long-time tradition in Illinois to give a favorite son or a favorite daughter a sort of a head start by naming them as the incumbent to be.
Look, choosing the harder right over the easier wrong for me isn't that difficult. When it comes to government, you shouldn't barter for a position. This is the people's office. People should vote on that office, not prearrange some deal making in the background. That's not how this works. The people will vote, and I hope that they look at my record, Mark. They look at a West Point background, a master's. I'm a father of 2 kids. I'm not a millionaire by any means, but I do care about state government. I want to do the right thing, and that's what I'm going to do.
Do you hope to see Secretary White finish his term?
I hope he does. He has an obligation to finish his term.
Why are those items that you mentioned the upgrading of the computer systems, for example. Why aren't they done by now? It's 2021.
You know, that's a question for Secretary White. He's built the foundation now in that Secretary's office. Prior to his arrival, there was a lot of problems in the Secretary of State's office. I want to make sure that as we move forward, you have young, energetic leadership that's capable of getting the job done, and that's what I'm going to do. And I know for a fact, my energy that I've brought to the General Assembly has changed the General Assembly and the way we do business. Now, there's a lot of other things going on here that are outside of my purview in various chambers, whatever, but I know that as the leader of one of the largest executive offices in the state of Illinois, we're going to do a great job.
You just mentioned the word energy. I think you meant about your personal energy,
Oh,
but
yeah.
there's also an energy bill going on here. The last time the state overhauled its energy policy was back in late 2016, early 2017 under the Rauner administration. As a result, taxpayers had to kick in a lot of money toward these big power companies, utility companies, to keep nuclear plants open, for example. But the state also gave these utility companies and power companies the legal ability to raise your electric bill, how much you spend. Right now, it looks like out of all the different, 7 or 8 proposals that are floating out there, including the governor's that just came onto the table recently, none of them seem to give us a guarantee that electric bills are going down. It looks like however we do this, if we're going to convert or transition to cleaner energy, wind and solar, that's going to cost either taxpayer funds or ratepayer funds or some combination of both. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but if you're going to go run for statewide office, isn't it going to be pretty easy for your opponents to say, look, he just voted to raise your electric bill and raise your taxes just after this whole ComEd
Well, first,
situation.
when it comes to the energy industry as a whole, there's no other legislator that's more involved than me. I spent the last 3 years legitimately becoming an energy expert on how supply and demand markets work. Now, your proposal as to, it's going to cost consumers X amount of dollars, well, I'll just say when 2 facilities do close in the state of Illinois, that's going to cause a supply shortage and it's going to cause a demand increase. And if you look at any study whatsoever across the entire country, energy prices are expected to go up, as is inflation. So, we really have to address the global perspective when it comes to the state of Illinois. And I say that because we're about to come off of a COVID-19 pandemic here. We're coming off it. People are getting vaccinated, which is a great thing. But the question is do we want multiple plants to close across the state of Illinois, for tens of thousands of people to lose their jobs, for these towns that depend on some of these facilities? They're going to take billions and billions and billions of dollars of economic impact. So the question we have to ask ourselves as public policy is it sound to preserve a nuclear plant at a base minimum cost based off of base expert analysis, and to use the experts to decide what's it take, whether to keep them open or to close them? And I know the General Assembly as a whole is going to have an opportunity to vote on that.
You mentioned the economic consideration. We're already seeing the first tremors of inflation after all of the government stimulus. There were some economists who worried we might overheat the economy if we just pump all this new money into it. But that comes back to the question of who should pay. Why should the average homeowner have to foot the bill to convert to cleaner energy? Why not stick that bill with the polluters?
And that's a great question. And some of the proposals that are out there do that. So for those carbon emitters, those big factories, that there's a price of carbon in the governor's bill that he's proposed. That's being addressed right now in the General Assembly as a total package. There's a clean energy investment package that we have for school buses. If you look at just a car alone, that's the single highest carbon emitter out of any energy source as a whole. A coal plant does not equate, when you put oranges to oranges, to a car engine. And so part of the things that we're looking at right now is energy investment in terms of the infrastructure, charging stations. If you look at by 2040, Mark, we're looking at about probably 60% of the cars on the road are going to be electric vehicles.
That rings a bell about the Colonial Pipeline hack. The Attorney General's office here in Illinois recently was paralyzed with a ransomware attack. I think leaders were just briefed on that this week to learn the extent of that malware and what that has done to cripple the function of government here. That brings me back to the Secretary of State's question real quick. How do you ensure in this modern digital age that the wheels of government don't come grinding to a halt because somebody breached the system?
Right. So, Mark, as a lowly intern, when I was a West Point cadet, I used to work in a national security agency. It was based on network security. I led the security or the cybersecurity task force for the Senate when it came to the Russian hacking for the elections that happened 4 years ago. People need to feel protected. People need to know that their information is secure, and that's one of the highest priorities as we move into this digital age. And if we're not focused on that, you can see in what's happening now, it's going to be problematic. So when we day one starting office, full IT audit, making sure that our systems are secure before we upgrade them, and we want to make sure the upgraded systems and software, they're secure.
All right, we look forward to speaking to a number of the other candidates running for Secretary of State, and that's just on the Democratic side. We have yet to see who the Republicans might be on the other side. Senator Mike Hastings, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your time.
A number of state legislators are making more in retirement than they did while they were on the job. Ben Bradley investigates a slice of the pension pie in Illinois next.